Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I will be going through my summer TBR. Alright, so I feel like I'm doing this a little bit late since I technically already filmed my June TBR, which you can view up there. I consider the summer months June, July, and August when it comes to these seasonal TBRs. However, I have been making them for all the other months, so I figured I would throw together 10 books that I'm hoping to get to in the next few months. I will say, so far for my June TBR, a little spoiler, only 3 of these books are books I know I will be getting to in June. I tried to choose primarily books that are on my physical shelf just so that I have a better chance of getting to them, because oftentimes if I just choose them off of my Goodreads TBR, they're kind of out of sight, out of mind, and I may or may not get to them. So I'm going to go through these starting with the 3 that I'm going to read via Kindle. I do plan on getting KU at some point during the summer. Specifically, I'll be traveling kind of mid-July, early August, and obviously I don't want to lug a bunch of books with me, so I do have a couple KU books as well as a trilogy that is on my Kindle that I'm hoping to get to, so I will start with those. Then I'll go through my physical reads and then end with a couple of audiobooks that I'm very much hoping to get to this season. Of course, let me know down below if you have read any of the books that I am going to mention, and let me know what books you are hoping to get to this summer season. Without further ado, we'll just go ahead and jump right in. All right, so we're going to start with the first book that I want to read on Kindle Unlimited, and that is Psycho by Only James. I read Unhinged earlier this year and had such a great time with the story. I was definitely looking forward to continuing this companion series of psychopaths falling in love. In this companion series, we are following, I think there's like 8 or so brothers, and they were all adopted by an eccentric billionaire. All of these brothers have been diagnosed as either psychopaths or sociopaths, and they were adopted as younger kids by this man so that he could kind of train them to be vigilantes, to use their need to kill for good by killing bad people that are not getting justice through the justice system. In this book, we are following August, and he's kind of considered the genius of the brothers. He is a professor at a university. Our other character, Lucas, used to be a FBI agent, and he would use kind of his clairvoyant skills to hunt down killers. It seems that touching people allows him to kind of read things about them that you usually couldn't. And one day he reads that one of his co-workers is a killer, but when he tries to tell people, they think that he's gone crazy and that co-worker is now out to kill him. So he takes refuge at a university. I have to admit, I couldn't tell if he was going to be a student or a teacher. I'm assuming that he's going to be a teacher since he worked for the FBI beforehand, but he bumps into August and can tell that he's a killer as well, and August kind of decides that he is going to prove to Lucas that not all killers are terrible, and of course he forms an obsession over Lucas and a strong need to protect him from this other killer. So it sounds very intense. I was not expecting any sort of sci-fi paranormal aspects to this series, but that clairvoyancy kind of adds that, so that's definitely an interesting factor. These stories are just a lot of fun, and they're very sexy and very grimy, so I'm definitely looking forward to continuing this series. I didn't want to read them too close together because I'm figuring that they are all relatively similar, but who knows, I may pick up book 3 as well while I have Kindle Unlimited, just because I have so much fun with them. The second book that I'm hoping to read on Kindle Unlimited is Sweet Berries by C.M. Costa. And this is a monster romance. I just feel like based off of the cute cover and of course the title, it's just giving summery vibes. We have a woman who lives in a small town and really enjoys her life there, but her sex life is very much lacking. So one day when she's in her bedroom, she senses someone watching her through the window and decides to put on like a little bit of a show for this person because she's just that horny. And it turns out to be the Mothman. I don't know much about Mothman or anything, but he sounds like he would be a cute guy. He's like fuzzy, I'm assuming. And I think it's just a romance between the two of them. It doesn't sound like anything too crazy is going on in the story. So I'm hoping that it's just a really sweet little romance with lots of great steam as well. And the last books I want to read on my Kindle are a trilogy. These are not on KU as far as I know. I know I had to pay like $1.99 or something for each of them, and I do own the physical books, and that is the Fox Court trilogy, but I am going to read the ones that I have on my Kindle just so that I don't mess with these nice special editions, or I don't know if they're special editions. I just bought them off an artist to put over the original copies of the story. So this is I wonder if this would be considered new adult because it's set in college. So I would say this is an indie published new adult series, and we are following a boy called Neil, who is the son of a serial killer who works for a mafia, or works for the mafia. And when he is younger, his mother kind of runs away with him to escape this life. Unfortunately, at the beginning of this book, his mother ends up passing away and he is now on his own. He ends up attending a high school where he joins the XC team. XC I would describe, as far as I can remember, as kind of like hockey off the ice mixed with lacrosse. So it's kind of a made-up sport, but our young man does play this, and one day a recruiter from a college comes and asks him to join the team. The problem with this is one of the members of the team is someone that Neil grew up with, meaning that he has connections to the mafia, despite the fact that this guy doesn't seem to remember Neil at all, which is, you know, fine with Neil. And the second is that this college that's recruiting him has a rivalry with another college that has direct ties to the mafia, meaning that if Neil joins this team, his father will find him and kill him. Neil is kind of forced to be on this team by one of the other players, and so he kind of joins this team with the expectation that he will be dead and gone by the end of the year. So begins a story of Neil trying to fix all the issues on this ragtag team of people, just trying to make the most of his year, and we just have a lot of unique characters. There's a lot of trigger warnings in this. This is kind of a chaotic story, to say the least. It has a huge fandom though, so if you're interested in fan art, fandoms, and lots of fan fiction, I know there's a lot revolving around this story. It's just incredibly addictive, but at the same time, I think it's one of those series you either hate or you love, and I happen to love it, and hopefully I love it on my reread. This is one of the rereads that I need to do this year, and hopefully I will be able to do it on this trip. All right, and now moving into the ones that I physically own. The first two that I'm going to talk about are ones that are on my June TBR. So if you don't want spoilers for my June TBR, go ahead and check that out first and then come on back. But the first book that I was able to get on my June TBR from this list is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ning. This is a historical fiction taking place in the 1970s following a Chinese American family after the death of their favorite daughter. This family has a daughter that they have put a lot of their hopes and dreams on. She's kind of the most successful, the one that I guess the parents maybe love the most. And one day, unfortunately, she is found dead in the lake, and we kind of watch this family's perfect image fall apart as they deal with the grief, and we kind of see behind the perfect image that they have put up about themselves. I am very excited to read the story. I've heard excellent things about it. I do like exploring grief, and this seems to have some family drama, which I am drawn to. I know I watched the TV show of Little Fires Everywhere, which was written by this author, and I really enjoyed the characters and the storyline, so I'm hoping that I like her work in a literary sense as well. The second book on this list that I will be reading in June is Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World by Benjamin Arley Sands, and this is the second book to Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. This is a queer YA coming of story. Well, I guess it's more historical because I think it's set in either 1970s, 1980s. I do believe the second book touches on the AIDS pandemic, which I think was in the 1980s. Our characters in this are seniors and have been together for a while now. I believe in the previous book they were probably starting out high school, freshman, sophomore kind of situation, but we are just following as they are just trying to make their way through a world that doesn't really accept them for who they are. I'm assuming that this story is going to be incredibly heartbreaking. I do love Ari and Dante as characters, so I'm very excited to get back to them, even though when I reread Aristotle and Dante, I just didn't quite click with it as much as I did the first time I read it. I'm hoping, since the author wrote this many years after Aristotle and Dante, that I see a lot of improvement in his writing, because I think that's where I struggled the most during my reread of the story. But yes, a book that I have been putting off for a long time and am finally getting to this summer. All right, the next book that I'm hoping to get to is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. Yeah, Christina Lauren. And this is a contemporary romance, supposed to be enemies to lovers. I believe I had this on a TBR at some point last summer, and I just never got around to it because I didn't feel like prioritizing it. I have to admit, this isn't a book that I'm like super excited for, but I know that if I'm gonna read this, I'm gonna read it in the summer, so I'm putting it on this list in hopes of incentivizing myself to actually pick it up. We have a couple, or not a couple, we have a man and a woman who do not get along, but they are friends of a couple that is getting married, and at this wedding, everyone but these two get food poisoning. So a very realistic setup, as always when it comes to contemporary romance. Anyway, this couple has their honeymoon planned, but it's non-refundable, so they end up sending these two on the honeymoon instead. And of course, they start developing feelings for each other. I have to admit, one of the reasons I have not been overly drawn to this book is because it's said to be fade to black, and oftentimes when I'm picking up a contemporary romance, I do want some smut scenes to it, but as long as this book has something else going for it other than just romance. I have also only read this author's or these authors contemporary YA story biography, so I don't really know how I feel about their adult stuff. So overall, I'm just a little bit nervous about this book, but it does have summer vibes, so I can just imagine myself sitting out in the sun reading this, and we'll see if it actually happens. Next, we have another very summery contemporary romance, and that is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. Obviously, this is the kind of book that you want to read in the summer. It's in the title. I've never read a Tessa Bailey book before, but she's definitely an author that I want to read. Her work seems to be very hit or miss, and not just that some people really love her work and some people really don't like it. It seems that a lot of people really like some of her books and really don't like her other books, but this seems to be one of her more popular books or even series. In this book, we are following Piper, and she is your everyday rich girl, and one day she does something kind of scandalous, I'm assuming, and her stepfather kind of cuts her off, and that she has to go to this coastal town to work at her late father's dive bar. Here she meets a crabby crabber. At least I think he's a crabber. And he is obviously not a fan of her. The two of them, personality-wise, probably clash a lot. But as they spend more time together, they obviously develop feelings for each other. I'm hoping that this book has some emotion to it, since she is working at her late father's dive bar. Obviously there should be like some sort of discussions of grief of losing a parent, and I do kind of like grief intertwined with my romances, that balances of mourning a love lost, kind of combined or balanced with a new love is always a good vibe for me. But overall, I'm hoping it's just a sweet summertime romance set in a cute small town. And the final book is very different, or a very different type of romance than the two I just talked about, and that is Desperate Measures by Katie Roberts. This book I wouldn't consider summery, but she is an author I've been wanting to try, so I want to stop putting off reading this book so I can decide if she's an author that I'm going to invest more time in. This is the first book to her Wicked Villains series, where she does kind of like retellings of Disney or fairy tales, but the villain ends up with the girl instead of the hero. Or sometimes the hero's involved as well, and there's, you know, a throuple kind of situation going on. I believe this one is between Jasmine and Jafar. I think that all these books have BDSM themes in them and are set in a more modern kind of setting, maybe with like casinos and like mafia kind of situations. Other than that, I don't know too much about it, so I'm going into it relatively blind. I'm assuming it's just gonna be a sexy time, and sometimes that's all you want and all you need on a hot summer day. All right, and jumping into the last two books, the audiobooks that I'm hoping to read. The first is a thriller called The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. And I actually started this book today, so I would say there's a pretty good chance that I am actually going to finish it. I've only read the first chapter of it, so I don't know any more about it than what's in the synopsis. Pretty much we have a man who is at a airplane bar, or at an airport bar, and he meets a woman there, and since their flight is delayed, they decide to grab a drink, and she asks him kind of about himself, and he ends up bringing up the fact that he recently found out that his wife is cheating on him, and he kind of jokingly says that he wants to kill her, and the woman says, well, I think you should, in a very non-joking way. So that's where I'm at. That's kind of what the synopsis discusses. I don't really know where it's going to be going from here, but as far as thrillers go, this seems to be relatively well received. I think it has over a 4.0 rating on Goodreads, which I think for thrillers is pretty good. So I am very excited to see what I think of this and to finally be getting around to it. And the final book on this list is actually a middle grade story. I was just scrolling through my Goodreads to see if I came across any books that I would really want to get to via audiobook, and this one kind of stood out to me, and that is Thanks a Lot Universe by Chad Lucas. So as I mentioned, this is a middle grade. It is also queer. We are following two young boys who are on their basketball team. Brian is very shy. He suffers from anxiety, and unfortunately, one day he and his brother are placed in foster care, which causes his anxiety to escalate into panic attacks. He and his older brother decide that the best course of action for them is to run away. Our other character is Ezra, and he is very popular and is friends with everyone on the team, including Brian, but he feels like recently people are treating him a little differently, and he's worried that people are realizing that he has a crush on Brian. And so he's kind of trying to keep his distance, but one day when he realizes that Brian and his brother have run away, he decides he needs to take action. This book seems like it's going to deal with some really important topics. I think middle grade does such a wonderful job when it comes to exploring difficult topics in such a way that a younger audience can understand. Obviously, we have queer representation in here. We have anxiety and panic attack representation, and we also get to explore the difficulties that come with being in the foster care system. I'm assuming that the story is going to be a little bit heartbreaking, but it's also going to be very sweet and heartwarming, and I am very excited to get to it as soon as possible. All right, guys, so those are the books I'm hoping to get to in the summer months. As I mentioned, let me know down below your opinions on any of these books that I mentioned, as well as what books you're hoping to get to. As always, thank you so much for supporting my channel, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!